As promised, it's now time for SME On Point. This week, we visit one of the few black manufacturing small businesses who manufacture paint. Fotla-based or Joburg-based Fotla Paint Manufacturing leveraged on the power of social media at a time when the pandemic was wreaking havoc in the small business communities. They now want to create a network of sales agents to help those that are unemployed. Do take a look at their story. It's edited by Mangoba Nkosi. Fotla Paint Manufacturing was born a few years ago when one co-founder was resolute in producing affordable and locally produced paint. And although there are already many players in this market, the team was not intimidated.
It's a very treacherous journey, and there's a lot of companies out there that we are going against. But with us, we told ourselves we are not competing with anyone. We are competing with ourselves to get this brand where it should be. And that's how we get to motivate ourselves. And that's the spirit behind the whole Fotla manufacturing concept.
Fotla Paint Manufacturing prides itself with an environmentally safe and lead-free paint, which they say puts them on the forefront of the paint manufacturing space. Maratani says at the peak of the pandemic, when many businesses were going under, the use of social media marketing came to their rescue.
Social media has really pushed Fotla out there. We went into social media. We worked inside the office. We spread our wings out there. We told people about Fotla paints, and people came to pass to the party, and we actually got a lot of sales out of social media rather than all the hardwares that are out there. But we did survive COVID, but it's not survival. We're struggling as well.
Many aspiring entrepreneurs are often held back by the lack of funding to start their businesses. But Maratani says dreams should not be arrested by the lack of funding.
You know, you get people out there making their own business, trying to set up a business. They go out there and look for funding, and it doesn't happen. And a person becomes dissolute, to say that, this is not happening, and therefore they give up. So I'd like to tell our people out there that if you have a belief, and if you have a goal, and if you want to do something out there, forget about funding. Go follow your heart, do what is out there. The little that you have, start with it.
At a time when jobs have become scarce and fewer, Fotla says they want to help those who are willing to be sales agents to make some income for themselves.
We call them, independent sales agents. So what these guys do, they knock on all doors, and if they get sales, they come back to us. We process the whole sales, we process the whole production, we deliver, they pay, they get their commission. That's how simple the story is.
Liabo Setho, SABC News, Johannesburg. Thank you so much to Fotla Paint Manufacturing for sharing the story with SME On Point. Remember, we are on Facebook. Our Facebook page is at SME On Point. So in light of the developments that have been happening in the higher education sector, I've invited the Regional Director at Business Partners Limited, Mrs. Jeremy Lang, to chat about the R150 Education SME Fund. This fund specialises in financing businesses operating in the education sector. But let's find out more about this fund. Jeremy is joining us via Zoom. Jeremy, thank you so much once again for joining us on SME On Point. It's always a pleasure. So this week has been characterised by protests at WITS over funding challenges. How have you seen this as an organisation, and what your response is to it as a business?
I think the education sector is an important one for the country. I think in those communities of students lies our future leaders, both in the public and private sector. This normally becomes a hot topic around fees, increases, historical debt, and so on. So we really do need to get a solution, a sustainable one, into the future that is fair, that is equitable, that is sustainable, to try and avoid these kinds of circumstances. But the investment in education has to continue, and Business Partners has created this fund a few years ago, which has been very successful. In fact, we have funded far beyond the quantum of the 150 million in this sector, which extends really from early stage childhood development right through to specialized schools, special needs schools, really lots of industry and activity in the sector.
Yeah. How do you think that the community of small businesses or entrepreneurs can play a role in at least reducing the funding gap that currently exists, where we can help the missing middle students and also create perhaps institutions that most families can afford?
Yes, I think if you look at how society has evolved in South Africa, more and more looking for this middle tier sector of education and educational needs. The one part that hasn't come on board to the full extent yet is the funding. And there are various programs. NSFAS has also been in the media as of late. There are subsidies. I think the corporate sector can come and do a bit more. They do, however, provide some extent subsidies and programs. But I think the one that's going to have the biggest impact is a sustainable model, funding students on a loan basis that can be repaid perhaps once they enter into the working environment and so on. And so every year you don't have to just look for a pot of money, but it becomes a sustainable model. So I think both the public and private sector have a bigger role to play for the investment now will pay dividends in the economy into the future.
Yeah. Jeremy, let's talk about some of the business types that the fund has funded in the education sector. Earlier on, you did mention that early childhood development. I can imagine that universities, I think I saw something that you have funded universities to the tune of, or businesses in the university sector to the tune of 16 million. Tell us the latest numbers by now.
Yes, the fund was originally earmarked to fund 150 million rand into the sector. We far exceeded that, over 200 million in fact. That's excluding another big sector that has evolved, and that's the student accommodation sector, which we also invested close to 100 million. So if you combine everything, we're close to 300 million invested, but across the numerous sectors, which spans from creches, nurseries, pre-primaries, secondaries, high schools, even specialized training institutions like culinary schools, CETA accredited institutions. These are all business opportunities that entrepreneurs have jumped on board, and it's starting to become a sector that's very lucrative from an investment point of view and for entrepreneurs to thrive in.
Yeah. Let's talk about how entrepreneurs that have an appetite to get into the space and start an institution, maybe an online university, strictly online, that one says, look, at this rate, someone won't have to worry about accommodation or even food because they would just have to study at home. Is there something you can cater to, and what sort of criteria would one need to meet in order to get funding for that?
Yes, these kinds of models actually already exist, also in some of the other African countries, and it takes away the constraints of physical infrastructure, bricks and mortar, and suddenly your ability to scale number of students is much easier. So this is a business model that is already evolving. What Business Partners does look at when they're funding these kinds of opportunities are the entrepreneurs behind the business. Do they have the skills, the technical skills, the business skills to run such an institution? And does it offer a viable proposition? Would students come and pay for these services and offering? And obviously the quality of that relative to the market. So the entire business plan, is it viable? Is it sustainable? And are they people that we would want to back from a business acumen and technical skill point of view?
Yeah, Jeremy, before I let you go, I want you to share with our viewers if there are any opportunities that they could look into when they look into the education sector, where they can play a role to help, particularly with what has been happening in the tertiary education system.
Yes, I think there is demand, there is no doubt, at various levels, both at the early, we see it in particular at the early childhood development stage as society grows, but also in particular, there's this middle tier private school market that is evolving with parents wanting a little bit more than what the public schooling system can offer, but also maybe can't afford the top end private school. So this middle tier market is definitely growing and is becoming very lucrative. So one needs to do research into these markets, but I mean, from developing online systems to software to, the opportunities are endless, but one needs to do research, one needs to be adequately knowledgeable about the industries and ensure that there is a market that will take up the offering.
Jeremy Lang from the Business Partners Limited, thank you so much for your time on SME On Point. Well, this is all from SME On Point for this week. I will see you again next week, Friday, but more news is coming up with my colleague Nastasia Arinse after the break. It's good afternoon for me.